When my daughter told me I had 2 days to pack my things and leave the home I'd built with my husband, I collapsed right there on our handcrafted kitchen tiles. A week later, I was standing in a courthouse with evidence that would not only get my house back but send her new financial advisors to prison. That's when I realized family trees sometimes grow the sharpest thorns. If you're watching this, hit subscribe and tell me where you're from in the comments. Because trust me, this story twists more than a tornado in Texas, and you won't want to miss what happens next. My name is Ana Morales. For 43 years, I was simply known as David's wife and Helena's mother. Those were titles I wore proudly, like badges of honor. David and I weren't wealthy when we met, just two dreamers with nothing but determination. We built everything from scratch, our construction business, our beautiful home on Maple Street, and what I thought was a loving family. You've always been my rock, Anna, David would tell me. Even when cancer took him last spring, he squeezed my hand and whispered, "Take care of our girl." I promised him I would. How could I know that 3 months later, that same girl would be staring at me with cold eyes I didn't recognize? The day of the will reading started normally enough. I wore David's favorite blue dress, the one he said matched my eyes. Helena picked me up in her new BMW, a car I didn't know she could afford. She seemed distracted, checking her phone constantly, but grief affects people differently. I didn't question it. Mr. Feldman, David's attorney for 20 years, seemed unusually nervous when we arrived at his office. His hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his glasses and pulled out the documents. "Before we begin," he said, clearing his throat, "I want to express again how sorry I am for your loss. David was not just a client, but a friend." Helena shifted impatiently beside me. "Can we just get this over with? I have a meeting at 3. The attorney's eyes flickered between us before he began reading. David had left everything split between Helena and me, the house, the business, the savings. It was what we had always planned. But there was something in Helena's expression, not surprise, but satisfaction, that made my stomach tighten. As Mr. Feldman finished, Helena's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then stood abruptly. "Well, that's settled then. Mom, we need to talk about some changes. Script part separator, . When we got to the car, Helena didn't start the engine. Instead, she turned to me with a business-like expression I'd never seen before. "Mom, I've been talking with some financial advisors. The business needs restructuring, and the house is too big for just you." "What are you saying?" My voice sounded small, even to my own ears. "I'm saying it makes financial sense to sell the house. I've already found a buyer." The world tilted sideways. "Sell our home. But your father built that house." "It's just a building, Mom." Her voice was ice-cold. "And I need the capital for the business. You can get a nice condo with your portion." "My portion? Helena, that home is as much mine as—" Actually, she cut me off. "The deed is in Dad's name, which means it's part of the estate now. My advisors have looked into everything." I couldn't breathe. "Who are these advisors?" David trusted Mr. Feldman for decades. Helena Laugueda Sharp, familiar sound. Feldman is outdated. Richardson Partners has shown me how to triple our assets within a year. I've never heard of them. Does Mr. Feldman know about this? He doesn't need to. She finally started the car. "You have 2 days to decide what you want to keep from the house. The rest will be auctioned." 2 days. Helena, eu quente Sirius. I've never been more serious. She glanced at me coldly. "Business is business, Mom. Dad would understand." "No, ifote." The David I knew for 40 years wouldn't recognize the daughter sitting beside me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the slight tremor in Mr. Feldman's hands, the way he wouldn't quite meet my eyes. There was something wrong about the whole situation. The next morning, I called him. "Anna," he sounded relieved. "I was hoping you'd call. There's something about David's will that concerns me." Script part separator, . I drove to Feldman's office that afternoon, my hands trembling on the steering wheel. "What concerns you about David's will?" I asked, sitting across from him. Feldman removed his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose. The will we read yesterday, it's not the only one David prepared. My heart skipped. What? David came to me 6 weeks before he passed. He was troubled. Feldman pulled out a folder. He said if anything happened to him suddenly, I should wait until after the official reading, then give you this privately. I took the envelope with my husband's familiar handwriting, for Anna's eyes only. Why didn't you mention this yesterday? David was explicit, and frankly, I was uncomfortable with the people Helena brought. Richardson Partners has a questionable reputation. I opened the envelope with shaking hands. Inside was a letter and a small key. My dearest testana, David's words broke tears to my eyes. If you're reading this, something has happened sooner than expected. There are things I couldn't tell you, to protect you and Helena. But now you need to know. He described hidden documentation in a safety deposit box at First National, records of threatening messages he'd received regarding the business. David suspected someone was embezzling funds, possibly with inside help. The business isn't what it appears, he wrote. Traste no until you know everything. Not even Helena, she may be influenced. I've left evidence that will help you. Remember our anniversary in Santa Fe? That's your clue. I looked up, stunned. Someone was threatening him? Why didn't he tell me? Feldman looked grim. The day after he left this, someone broke into our office. Only client files were targeted. My blood ran cold. You think his death wasn't just cancer? I think, he said carefully, that the timing of his decline was suspicious. And now Helena sudden alliance with Richardson Partners. That's when my phone buzzed with a text from Helena. Movers coming tomorrow at 9 a.m. Be ready, or they'll pack for you. Script part separator, I called my sister Margaret that night, my voice breaking as I explained everything. You can stay with me, she said immediately. But Anna, this sounds serious. If David suspected criminal activity, I need to get to that safety deposit box before anyone else does, I said, already planning. And I need to figure out what he meant about Santa Fe. Wasn't that your 20th anniversary trip? When you got food poisoning, the memory hit me like lightning. The backup drive. David always joked it was the only souvenir from that trip. He backed up all his business files after we got home. The next morning, Helena arrived with the movers and 3 men in suits I'd never seen before. Mom, this is Mr. Richardson and his associates, she said briskly. They're helping inventory Dad's assets. Richardson, tall, silver-haired, with a smile that never reached his eyes, extended his hand. Mrs. Morales, my condolences. We're just here to ensure everything transitions smoothly. I'm sure you are, I replied, not taking his hand. But this is still my home for the next few hours, and I don't recall inviting you. His smile tightened. Helena mentioned you might be emotional. Perfectly understandable. While the movers began boxing up my life, I noticed Richardson's associates systematically searching the house, checking bookshelves, looking behind pictures, tapping walls. They weren't inventorying, they were hunting for something. I retreated to the bathroom, locking the door and calling Feldman. They're searching the house, I whispered. What exactly did David have? Financial records, Feldman murmured. Evidence of systematic fraud within the company. Anna, David believed someone close to him was involved. The bathroom doorknob rattled. Mr. Morales, Richardon's voice osed concer. Are you all right there? Helena's worried about you. I stared at my reflection, a scared woman I barely recognized, and made a decision. Tell Helena I'm fine, I called back, strength returning to my voice. Just getting ready to leave. But I wasn't leaving. I was preparing for war. Script part separator, When I emerged from the bathroom, I had tucked David's letter into my bra and composed my face into a mask of defeat. Sometimes the best strategy is letting your enemies think they've won. I'll be out by tonight, I told Helena, who barely looked up from her phone. Great. Just leave the keys on the counter. No emotion, like she was talking to a stranger. I packed only essentials, clothes, photos, and my grandmother's jewelry. When no one was looking, I retrieved David's old external hard drive from behind the loose baseboard in our closet, our Santa Fe souvenir. Margaret picked me up at 6 p.m. As we drove away, I didn't look back at the house where I'd raised my daughter, celebrated anniversaries, and nursed my husband through his final days. First stop, bank, I told Margaret. The safety deposit box contained exactly what David promised: financial records, emails, and a flash drive. But the most shocking item was a folder labeled Richardson Partners Investigation. My hands trembled as I read the private investigator's report. Richardson wasn't just a financial advisor. He was being investigated for defrauding elderly clients in 3 states. And there was a photo that made my blood freeze: Helena having dinner with Richardson 6 months ago, while David was still alive. She's been working with him for months, I whispered to Margaret. Before David even died. That night, I connected David's hard drive to Margaret's computer. It contained years of company records, including evidence that $2.3 million had been siphoned from the business over the past year through ghost accounts. I called Feldman at midnight. We need to move quickly, he said after I explained. I'm contacting Judge Rivera for an emergency injunction to freeze all assets. And Anna, you should call Detective Martinez. This isn't just fraud anymore, with the timing of David's decline. I finished his thought. You think they might have hastened his death? I think, Feldman said carefully, that people willing to steal millions might not draw the line at murder. Script part separator ===. The next morning, I met with Detective Martinez at the police station. A no-nonsense woman with sharp eyes. She listened intently as I laid out everything I discovered. Mrs. Morales, these are serious allegations, she said, reviewing the documents. If what you're suggesting is true, this isn't just financial fraud. It could be conspiracy, elder abuse, and possibly worse. I know how it sounds, I admitted. My own daughter working against her father? I wouldn't believe it myself if I hadn't seen the evidence. Detective Martinez nodded. Unfortunately, I've seen family turn against family for far less than millions of dollars. We'll investigate, but these cases take time. Meanwhile, I suggest you get a protection order. When I left the station, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Back off if you know what's good for you. Not everything has to end like it did with David. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped the phone. I forwarded it to Detective Martinez immediately. That afternoon, I received a call from Helena. What have you done? She hissed. Richardson says there's a freeze on all the accounts. Why were you meeting with Richardson 6 months ago? I countered. While your father was still alive. A pause. You're being ridiculous. Dad's business needed restructuring. Stop lying. My voice cracked with emotion. I have the photos, Helena. I have the records. What did they promise you? Money. A position. Was it worth betraying your father? You don't understand anything about business, she snapped. Dad was stuck in the past. Richardson showed me the potential. Did you know he's under investigation in 3 states for fraud? Interrupted. Another pause, longer this time. That's not possible. Check your facts, Elena. I have. And I'm not stopping until I know exactly what happened to your father. Script part separator gap, my heart pounding. For a brief moment, I'd heard uncertainty in Helena's voice, the first crack in her icy facade. The next morning, a courier delivered a formal letter from Richardson's attorney. They were suing me for defamation and interference with business relations. They wanted $5 million in damages. Margaret found me sobbing at her kitchen table. Is this what it's come to? My own daughter's business partners suing me? They're scared, Margaret said, examining the letter. You've hit a nerve. I spent the next 2 days in court with Feldman, fighting to maintain the freeze on David's assets. Judge Rivera, a stern woman with decades of experience, listened as Richardson's high-priced attorney painted me as a grieving widow unable to accept change. Mrs. Morales is making wild accusations based on paranoia, not evidence, he argued smoothly. My clients are simply trying to modernize a failing business that Mr. Morales, God rest his soul, had let deteriorate. When it was Feldman's turn, he methodically presented the evidence from David's safety deposit box, the suspicious transactions, the timing, the threats. Your Honor, he concluded, we're not asking you to rule on fraud charges today. We're simply requesting that these assets remain frozen while a forensic accountant examines the books. If there's nothing to hide, why are Mr. Richardson and his associates fighting this so aggressively? The judge peered at me over her glasses. Mrs. Morales, are you prepared for the consequences if these allegations prove false? I met her gaze steadily. Your Honor, my husband of 43 years warned me with his dying breath that something was wrong. I will face whatever consequences come, but I owe it to David to find the truth. She nodded once. The freeze remains in place for 30 days pending investigation. Next case. Outside the courtroom, I came face to face with Helena for the first time since she'd forced me from our home. She looked thinner, with dark circles under her eyes. Script part separator, This isn't over, Helena said, but her voice lacked conviction. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and saw something I hadn't noticed before. Fear. Not anger. Fear. What have they told you would happen if I started asking questions? I asked quietly. She flinched, glancing at Richardson, who was watching us from across the lobby. You don't understand what you're getting into, Mom. Please, just drop this. Then explain it to me. Help me understand. For a moment, I thought she might break down, might tell me everything. Then Richardson appeared at her side. Helena, the car's waiting, he said smoothly, his hand on her elbow. Mrs. Morales, I suggest you reconsider your position. Legal battles are expensive. As they walked away, Helena looked back once, and the expression in her eyes haunted me for days. A week later, Detective Martinez called. Mrs. Morales, we've found something concerning. Can you come to the station? The medical examiner had reviewed David's hospital records. The cancer was real, but there were inconsistencies in his final decline. Toxicology hadn't been performed because no one suspected foul play, but his symptoms were consistent with certain poisons that accelerate organ failure. You're saying someone murdered my husband? We're saying it's possible his death was hastened, Martinez clarified. We're requesting an exhumation order. That night, I received another text. You should have taken the condo. Now you'll get nothing but a cemetery plot next to David. E forvarde dito Martinez, mai rende shaking incontrolable. She called immediately. Don't go home to your sisters tonight, she ordered. We're sending a patrol car. Pack a bag, you're going to a safe house. Script part separator, As I settled into the safe house, a Spartan apartment with bulletproof windows and a police officer stationed outside, the reality of my situation hit me. 3 months ago, I was planning my garden. Now I was in protective custody, suspecting my daughter's involvement in her father's death. Detective Martinez visited daily with updates. They'd obtained the exhumation order. Richardson's financial history revealed a pattern of targeting family-owned businesses in transition. Most damning of all, they'd found evidence that Helena's name had been added to several offshore accounts. What happens to her if this is proven? I asked, my mother's heart still aching despite everything. That depends on her level of involvement, Martinez said gently. If she was manipulated or coerced. I clung to that possibility like a lifeline. On the 7th day, my phone rang, Helena's number. Mom. Her voice sounded small, like when she was a child calling from a sleepover, wanting to come home. Helena. I gripped the phone tightly. Are you okay? I messed up, she whispered. I didn't know what they were planning. Richardson said Dad was making bad decisions because of the medication. He said we needed to protect the business. My heart pounded. And you believed him? At first. Then. Her voice broke. They started changing medications. Said it was to keep Dad comfortable. When I questioned it, Richardson showed me documents. Dad had massive debts I knew nothing about. He said if I didn't cooperate, we'd lose everything. There were no debts, Helena. Those documents were fake. Silence, then a choked sob. Mom, I think they're watching me. Richardson knows I called Feldman yesterday. He's been acting strange. I found a gun in his desk. Fear gripped me. Where are you now? At the office. Everyone's gone for the day, but a noise in the background. Someone's here. I have to go. Helena, wait. The line went dead. I called Martinez immediately. My daughter's in danger. They know she's talking. Within minutes, police were dispatched to the company headquarters. I paced the safe house, praying I hadn't lost my daughter as well as my husband. Script part separator, ===. 20 agonizing minutes passed before Martinez called back. We have her, she said, and I collapsed onto the couch. She's shaken but unharmed. Officers arrived just as Richardson was trying to force her into his car. The next 48 hours passed in a blur. Helena was placed in protective custody at a separate location while she gave her statement. Richardson and 2 associates were arrested on multiple charges: fraud, embezzlement, and now attempted kidnapping. When I finally saw Helena again, it was in an interview room at the police station. She looked both younger and older than her 35 years, vulnerable in ways I hadn't seen since her childhood. "Mom," she whispered when I entered, rising halfway before faltering. "I don't know if I can ever expect you to forgive me." I studied my daughter's face, searching for the cold woman who had evicted me. Instead, I saw only shame and fear. "What happened, Helena?" "The whole truth this time." She told me everything. How Richardson had approached her at a business conference 6 months earlier. How he'd gradually convinced her that David was making irrational decisions due to his medication. How they needed to protect the company by restructuring, which required her complete cooperation. When Dad died, Richardson said the time was right to take control, she admitted, tears streaming down her face. He showed me documents, debts, lawsuits pending, all fake, I know now. He said we needed to liquidate assets quickly. And throwing me out of my home? Was that his idea too? I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. She flinched. "He said you'd fight the changes. That you were too emotional to understand business decisions." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "And he implied that if you became difficult, there were ways to handle that too." That's when I started to realize what I'd gotten involved with. Script part separator, ===. But when I found those messages on his computer, about handling you the way they handled Dad, I knew. She looked up, her eyes swimming with tears. "I think they poisoned him, Mom. And I helped them do it by not asking questions." The confession hung between us like a physical thing. Part of me wanted to scream at her, to make her feel the full weight of her betrayal. But the larger part, the mother who had held her through nightmares and heartbreaks, saw only my child drowning in guilt. Martinez entered before I could respond. "Helena's statement has been formally recorded," she told me. "The district attorney wants to talk plea agreements." "What kind of agreement?" I asked. "Immunity in exchange for testimony against Richardson and his network." "Mrs. Morales," she added gently, "your daughter's cooperation could help us bring down an organization that's been targeting vulnerable families for years." 2 weeks later, we sat in Judge Rivera's courtroom again, not for an emergency hearing, but for Richardson's arraignment. The charges were read aloud: fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy, elder abuse, and most shockingly, second-degree murder in the death of David Morales. Helena sat beside me, pale but composed. She would testify against the man who had manipulated her, against the organization that had taken advantage of our family's vulnerability during David's illness. The evidence she provided had already led to arrests in 2 other states. As Richardson was led away in handcuffs, he glared at us with such hatred that I instinctively reached for Helena's hand. She gripped mine tightly, the first physical contact we'd had since before David's death. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed us. "Mrs. Morales, how does it feel to know your husband's killers will face justice?" I looked at the cameras, thinking of David and all we had built together. Our life hadn't been perfect, but it had been ours. Script part separator, ===. My husband believed in truth and justice, I said clearly. Today is the first step toward both. I didn't mention the long road ahead, the full trial, the forensic accounting that would unravel years of Richardson's schemes, the painful process of rebuilding trust with my daughter. That night, Helena and I returned to Margaret's house. We sat in awkward silence at the kitchen table, the weight of all that had happened pressing down on us. "I've been looking at apartments," Helena finally said, staring into her tea. "Something small, until this is all settled. I nodded. The house on Maple Street was still in legal limbo, tied up in the investigation, possibly for months. What will you do? She asked hesitantly. After the trial. The question hung between us. What would I do? My life had been shattered, then rearranged into something unrecognizable. I don't know yet, I admitted. But I've been thinking about what your father would want. 3 days later, Mr. Feldman called with news. The forensic accountants had finished their preliminary report. Not only had they confirmed the embezzlement, but they discovered something else, a separate account David had established years ago, untouched by Richardson's schemes. It's substantial, Anna, Feldman said. David always was cautious. He created a failsafe none of us knew about. The revelation brought tears to my eyes. Even from beyond the grave, my husband was still protecting us. The following week brought another development, the official toxicology report from David's exhumation. The medical examiner confirmed traces of arsenic, small amounts administered over time, accelerating the cancer's progression. They didn't give him cancer, Detective Martinez explained, but they ensured he wouldn't survive it. The timeline suggests poisoning began shortly after Helena signed those first documents. Script part separator ===. I stared at the calendar on Margaret's wall. 6 months since David's death. 3 months since I'd been forced from my home. 2 months since Helena's confession. 1 month until Richardson's trial would begin. During this time, Helena had found a small apartment near the courthouse. We met weekly for coffee, awkward, stilted conversations that barely scratched the surface of our damaged relationship. But we were trying. The district attorney called us in for trial preparation. Helena would be their star witness against Richardson. You need to be prepared, she warned us. His defense will try to paint Helena as the mastermind, a greedy daughter who manipulated her father's business associates. Helena paled. They'll twist everything. That's why we need to address it head-on, the DA explained. Show how Richardson targeted you specifically because of your vulnerability during your father's illness. As we left the meeting, Helena turned to me. Mom, there's something I haven't told you. My heart sank. What now? Richardson approached me because of Dad, but he stayed because of me. She couldn't meet my eyes. I was so flattered by his attention. He made me feel important, understood. There was a relationship. The revelation shouldn't have shocked me, but it did. You and Richardson? It ended when I realized what he'd done to Dad. She finally looked up, her eyes swimming with tears. I was such a fool. I wanted to be angry, to shout that her vanity had cost her father's life. Instead, I saw my daughter, broken, manipulated, used by a predator who had identified her insecurities and exploited them masterfully. He chose you because you were vulnerable, I said finally. That's what predators do. The week before the trial, Richardson's lawyer contacted Feldman with a settlement offer, $10 million to drop all civil claims, with no admission of wrongdoing. Take it, Helena urged. We can be done with this nightmare. But I shook my head. This isn't about money. It's about justice for your father. The morning of the trial, I stood in front of the mirror in Margaret's guest bathroom, straightening the suit I'd bought specifically for this day. Not black. David wouldn't have wanted me in mourning colors. Navy blue, like the dress he loved. As I entered the courtroom, Richardson sat at the defense table, still somehow looking polished despite months in custody. Our eyes met briefly before he looked away, a flicker of something, fear, crossing his face. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Evidence mounted day by day, financial records, medical reports, and most damning of all, Helena's testimony. She spoke clearly, detailing how Richardson had groomed her, manipulated her grief, and used her to access David's business. When the defense attorney tried to paint her as a willing conspirator, she didn't flinch. Yes, I was foolish, she admitted. Yes, I was vain. But I never agreed to murder my father. On the final day, as we awaited the verdict, Richardson requested to address the court. The judge allowed it. Mrs. Morales, he said, turning to face me. I want you to know that your husband was a worthy opponent. In all my years, I've never encountered someone who plans so thoroughly for the protection of his family. A chill ran through me at his casual admission. The jury took only 4 hours to return with a guilty verdict on all counts. As the bailiff led Richardson away, he looked back once at Helena. The hatred in his eyes made me step protectively between them. 6 months later, life had found a new rhythm. The house on Maple Street was ours again. Helena had moved into the guest house, close but separate, a boundary we both needed as we rebuilt our relationship. One evening, as we sat on the porch David had built, watching the sunset he'd loved, Helena asked, "Do you think you'll ever fully trust me again?" I considered the question carefully. "Trust isn't given back all at once," I said finally. "It's rebuilt day by day." She nodded, understanding the long road ahead. Later that night, I stood in our bedroom, my bedroom now, and touched David's photo. "We're going to be okay," I whispered. "Not the same, but okay." And for the first time since his death, I truly believed it.